What's up, y'all? It's Mike. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Professional Dependa. I swear I will learn how to talk one of these days. This week's episode of the Professional Dependa, we're still talking about PCSing and stuff, but this week I have a guest. Guest today, his name is Mike, and I'm Mike. I called it the meeting of the Mikes. It was kind of fun. Anyway, he's a real estate agent in the D.C., Virginia area. Not exactly sure how long he's been a real estate agent. I think we get into that. He's a really cool guy. He's prior Army. He's a baseball ump at a high level. He's a hockey fan, music fan. We actually spend a little bit of time talking about music. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. The whole month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we dive in a little bit into that very briefly. But anyway, stay tuned. First time we've had a guest in a while. First time we've had a new guest in a long time. So y'all check it out. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers. So Mike, you and I have actually never really talked before. Like, we just kind of hooked up on the men's page on Facebook recently because I started posting a lot more about this podcast and this PCS season, as we both are well aware of. And so lots of military families moving. So before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you. So are you like me? Are you just like full-time support staff? Are you prior service?
I'll go back into the day. So I graduated high school in '93, and at that time, right, like my childhood growing up wasn't as great. So I didn't have a great education and a chance to go to college. My family is very financially poor. So I decided to join the military like later in my high school year, and I joined the Army in 1993, right, a couple months after basic training, from Seattle, Washington, or just south of Seattle. And then I just spent 9 years in the military. So I got to go to Germany for 3 years, nice. Colorado, and then ended up in Fort Lewis, Washington. So I, traveled there. Was married once before while I was active duty, and then got divorced like most of us military guys do, and then met my current wife. I was actually active duty when we met. She was still in college. And then graduated, moved to Seattle area with me, and then worked in the financial industry with Arthur Andersen. Well, we all know that collapse happened. And then the next thing was like, well, I don't know. She didn't want to work in the consulting business because she was gone 2 weeks out of the month, Oh, wow. So, as much as your spouse is gone, you don't like it, right? In money's there, but you'd rather have your spouse around. So she decided for a career change. We talked and, decided on the military, which I was, I'm a big fan of the military. So 20 years later, here we are. She's still in, has a few more years to go because there's the next rank is very close. We should find out in the next months. I've been a military spouse for 20 years. So it's kind of fun being, there was a 2-month gap from when I got out and she joined. So my whole adult life has been encompassed with the military, the ins and outs. So PCSing that you talked about, I think we've PCS 13 times in 23 years. Yeah. So, it as you've moved to, it is a very stressful time. The uncertainties, the unknowns, like we've PCS to Hawaii, from Hawaii back, schools, where are you going to live? Everything is very stressful. So, that's, I guess, my background. So as a spouse, I have tried to be on the support side. I've stayed at home with the kids for years. And then I recently got on the real estate, which we'll probably dive into here pretty soon. But I've been a very big support. No, this is my freak cell phone. What's going on here? Okay, can you hear me?
There we go.
What do you mean my internet's unstable? I'm on a hotspot here. Let's go, Verizon. Okay. So I was talking about the support, and I followed her. She goes, that's when you decide to be the spouse and she works, there's not a lot of really choices, but wherever she decided to go, we've picked up, and we've gone. So it's been a great adventure so far. I love it. I'm a big advocate of young men and women going to the military. It changed my life because I was a knucklehead. I didn't have a lot of direction, and it gave me a lot of purpose. And I've grown since I was 18. So anybody asks me, what do you think about joining? I'm like, absolutely. Whether 2 years or 20 years, I don't care. And I have friends that I was in the infantry. Okay. The grunt, but I have people that's done other things. And I'm like, who cares what you do in the military, right? Like everybody can't be a pilot. They can't be a Navy SEAL. They can't be a Green Beret, right? There's other jobs in the military that you still get that discipline and structure from. So I'm a big advocate for it. Absolutely.
So is your wife Army still, or is she Air Force? What is she in?
She's Air Force. So that's I
Okay.
guess I that. So I was an Army guy.
Right.
Her dad was a Marine, and then her
Mhm.
brother became a Marine as well. So the whole the whole conversation was definitely not the Navy. So hopefully
Right.
I think your wife's Air Force, but
Yep. She is.
yeah, so the conversations of what branches are better, it's just different.
Yeah.
An Army guy versus
Everybody's got a different role to fill.
absolutely like being an Army guy, I love the Army.
Mhm.
That's who I am. But I see a different side with the Air Force every single day, and
Yeah.
it's different.
Right.
The Marines are different, and we make fun of the branches, but everybody has their different role, like you said. So yeah, so she's still active duty Air Force. We're up here at the Pentagon, and maybe another year or so, who knows where the
Right.
military center.
That's just true because like we're getting ready to move very very shortly. We're moving to like if we're moving next month to Wright Pad up in Ohio.
That's actually on our short list too.
Oh, right on. Well, if y'all move up there in the next year or so, we'll be maybe we'll be stationed together because we'll be at Wright Pad.
Absolutely. My kid plays very high level hockey, and Ohio area is not a bad spot for hockey because you're
Yeah.
close to Chicago, Minnesota,
Mhm.
Michigan. So we've kind of, penciled in as that one of our areas.
Right on. All right. So one thing that I want to get into or want to discuss briefly before we get into the PCS and real estate stuff. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is one
Hmm.
thing that I've been preaching for years is about men taking their mental health seriously. And like I'm sure you've heard this expression by now, you can't pour from an empty cup. So
Hmm. That's a good
what do
one.
you do as a guy, as a male spouse? What is one thing that you do, or maybe a couple things you do that help recharge you and fill your cup whenever that way you're not running on empty mentally?
Huh. Wow. I didn't know I was going to get this thrown at me.
Uh,
I'm going to go back to my music.
Okay.
I mean, I also officiate college baseball. So hopefully, it's at a very high level, college baseball, a lot of
Right on.
games on TV. So there's a lot of stress there.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's fun. I love it being
Mhm.
outside. But recharge your mental health. I love to hit golf. I say my therapy is I love
Mhm.
going to the driving range and hitting golf balls.
Right on.
I'll put music in, right, headphones, and
Mhm.
just listen to music and hit golf balls. I think it's my therapy. Hopefully that doesn't upset anybody, but I love to listen to music like we talked about
Mhm.
before we started, and
Yeah.
that could change your mood dramatically, right?
Mhm.
Like we said, no matter how bad your mood is, you put the right song in, and everything can change. So I forgot May was Mental Health Month, but yeah, that's what I do.
Right. No, and I don't think like anybody that gets upset by you saying that your therapy is going to hit golf balls, they need to evaluate themselves because I'm not a golfer by any means. I mean, I took
Yeah.
a golf course in college to try to learn the game and I sucked at it so bad. I was like, you know what, this is not my thing. But I lift weights and that's my
Oh, there you
thing.
go.
So
Yeah.
I'm a power lifter. So, I'll go and I'll put on like everybody's like, oh, power lifter, you're going to listen to like thrash metal. And no, I'll put on, like I said, I'll put on Earth, Wind and Fire and old school Marvin Gaye. I'm in
Yeah.
there hitting deadlift PRs to the funk music. So
Yeah. You can go out there,
you can
throw some
anybody can
slam.
fill their anybody can they can fill their cup, they can recharge themselves however they want, whatever works for them. So
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
I wanted to and actually like one of my old supervisors from my law enforcement days, he's a college baseball officiant as well.
Really?
Yeah.
You happen to know the name?
Yeah, Jeff Lemoyne. He's from Louisiana.
Oh, I used to umpire a lot in Louisiana. We used to be stationed in Mississippi, so
Okay.
that's where my, I guess, officiating career really took off, was in
Yeah,
Mississippi.
he lives
Jeff
in Baton Rouge.
LeMoyne. In Baton Rouge.
Mhm.
Oh, one of my favorite stadiums to work at is LSU, Alex Box Stadium.
I used to work. Used to be a police officer at LSU, and we would fight over who got to work overtime for the baseball games
Yeah,
because it was so much less stressful than the football games
yeah,
because it's
absolutely.
two different fans.
Yeah,
I mean, the same people you see at the football game that like are getting ready to be belligerent and ridiculous are totally chill and cool at the baseball games.
yep,
Completely
yeah.
different.
I've worked probably 20 games in LSU. When I lived down there, I love it. It's one of my favorite places. The fans,
Uh huh.
just when they play Garth Brooks' Baton Rouge song in in the eighth inning and everybody goes
Mhm.
crazy. Yeah, it's just, I mean, LSU's had a great baseball program. They're number one in the
Mhm.
country right now.
Yeah,
Um,
the LSU baseball is like the only team that was there that I really truly enjoyed because they didn't give us any problems.
yeah, they normally don't.
So just real quick, what years were you reffing there?
20, so I started down there. I think maybe the first year I worked at LSU was probably 2011. So I worked
Okay.
from there 2011 to 2016
Okay,
when
so
I lived in the
we probably know some of the same. I'll text you some names later, and we'll see if we know some. Because we left in 2010. My wife graduated the vet school at LSU in 2010,
Okay.
and so we were already gone from there. But a lot of the people that I knew and that I still know were there at that time frame still.
Okay. Yeah.
But all right, so the whole reason why Mike is here is because he's a real estate agent, and we are going to, as we've been talking about on the podcast, about my personal ideas on tips and tricks on listing a house, buying a house, how to go through the PCS process. You were like, "Hey, well, I'm a real estate agent. Let's talk about this." So you know what? That sounds like a great idea to me. Um, so what are, as a military spouse, military families getting ready to, they got their orders. They're like, okay, we're going to right pat, since we've already talked about that. What do you recommend as like the first step to the house hunting process at that point is?
Great leading question. All my wife's whole career, we've always lived on a military base.
Okay.
For 16 years, we lived on a military base. That's the first
Mhm.
thing. We're PCS and a right pat. I'd go on the base housing and I'd look and fill out the form about getting on the wait list. That would be our first thing, especially with little kids, right? Like the security of being on base,
Mhm.
the community of being on base. There's nothing better than living on base. You have an instant community. I mean, we've lived all over the place, and when your neighbor is another military person, you don't have to lock your doors. Nobody's going to steal your stuff. You live in a gated community. Your kids can wander around base. You don't have to worry anything about them. We've always lived on a military base and love it until we moved here. Obviously, the Pentagon doesn't have military housing, so
Right.
we bought a house off base. So the first thing I think people should do is sit down and ask that question: do we want to live on base or off base? And then if it's off base, do you want to rent or do you want to buy? So that's serious questions too. How much BAH does your spouse get? And then you can figure out what you guys want to do. I tell people now, knowing what I know, I would buy a house everywhere I lived. If I could go back, I would buy a house. You have a house in Warner Robins, Georgia. I would absolutely not sell it. Right? There's no greater wealth. Warren Buffett said it best. There's no greater wealth in America than real estate. If you bought a house a few years ago, maybe before COVID, your appreciation and value has gone through the roof. So for our house, we've gained almost 6 years, almost 300K in equity.
Oh,
that's
wow.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The house should have never been worth that much, but that's what happened with COVID and everybody spending all their money and going up. So once you make that decision, whether it's renting or buying, and if you're renting, hopefully nobody gets offended, but if you're renting, you're paying somebody's mortgage. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So I know what, like I said, know what I know now. If the government's giving you, we'll just say right, Pat, it's $2,000. If the government's giving you $2,000 a month, well, why not invest it in a house?
Right.
I mean, I get it. You might not be in right path forever, but when you own a house, it's yours and you can keep it and rent it out. Most folks don't realize they can have more than one VA loan at the same time. Everybody thinks you have one, you have to sell it and get your certificate of eligibility back. That's not true. If you are allowed $1 million and you own a $400,000 house in Georgia, you can still buy a $200,000 house in Georgia because you still have eligibility on your VA eligibility. You can actually own 3 or 4 houses. Just as long as you have eligibility, the VA will allow you to buy a house. VA loans close at a crazy rate. Appraisals are coming back at almost 92% across the board. There's areas where they come back in lower, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's the first thing is rent versus buy. Once you make that decision and you want to buy, you gotta find a realtor. And you got to find a realtor on both sides. So hopefully your realtor down in Georgia did a good job of maintaining contact with you, touching you, happy birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, Thanksgiving. We call them touches. Yeah. Hopefully they did a good job of maintaining contact with you because when you go to sell your house, the first person you should think of, if your experience was good, should be the realtor who helped you buy. That's how it should be. It's not always the
Right.
case. I think the NAR, National Association of Realtors, said 88% of people are happy with their agent that they used to buy, but only, I think it's 16% reuse that same agent to sell. And why is that? Because once the transaction's over, we kind of wipe our hands a little bit and, see you later and, go about your business. And it's unfortunate, but that's how it is. We get busy and doing other things, and sometimes you forget that stuff.
Yeah. When we were in Arkansas, I reached out to a buddy of mine that because I used to work with security forces at Barksdale as a civilian, but I'd reached out when I was moving to Arkansas. I reached out to a buddy of mine that I used to work with. I was like, "Oh, hey, aren't you in Little Rock?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Cool. What are you doing?" And he was actually a banker. And I was like, "Hey, cool. We're moving. Do you know any real estate agents?" And he was like, "Yeah, my wife." I was like,
Oh,
"Awesome."
yeah.
And but it wasn't. He's prior Air Force. By the time we got there, we met up for lunch. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "We just got divorced." So
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, okay. Then why did you recommend me to be an agent?" And he was like, "Oh, because she's really good at her job. Me and her just didn't work out." I was like, that's a fair assessment.
yeah.
But
We might not be married, but she's still good at her job.
yeah. So I was like, that's completely fair. But I don't know if it was because of the relationship that me and her husband had, because we're buddies. Like we completely lost touch. And so when I sold that house, I reached out to another military spouse that I'd become friends with, and she still sends me Christmas cards.
See, and
this is 3 years later.
Okay, so that's exactly how it should be. Like, for example, Thanksgiving, I usually go and I give out apple pies or pumpkin pies to clients, right? We call them Popeyes, or just ways to stay in touch.
Right.
I had a client, they were renters, they were military, and I helped them find a rental. But I did crazy things like carry their kid on my shoulders while we were looking at a bunch of houses, and I played hide and seek with the kid, right? And I was like, "Hey, you guys go look at a house. It doesn't, I don't care what the house looks like, or I'm not living here. Let me play with your kid so you guys can be less distracted from him and focus on the house." So they rented. A year later, they hated their rental company, wanted to get out, so they bought a house. And because I stayed in contact with them, I helped them buy a house. Bought the house. They still own it. They've PCS twice. I helped them find an agent in 2 different spots, and now I'm their property manager for the rental and that they still have here in the area. So that's, we should stay in contact with people. And then that lady, if anybody ever PCS in the Little Rock, who's the first person you're going to think of as an agent?
100%. I'm going to throw them Diana's way every time. Well, it's just, and just like here, whenever we moved here, our real estate agent, who, like you said, she helped us buy this house. She's our listing agent now, because she's been wonderful. But she did stuff like, I was like, "Hey, we're really we need to find a babysitter. Do you know of anybody?" She hooked us up with our babysitter, who she's practically part of the family at this point. Like, our babysitter, she has been phenomenal. Yeah. So there was zero question that when we were getting ready to list, who we were going with. Absolutely no question.
That's the other thing. Like, we should have a Rolodex. When I moved here, I didn't know anybody. I asked my agent. That's how I actually got into the business, because, as you can tell, I like to talk to people. So she was like, "You'd be good at this. It's 80% of this is just personal relations." But I get a Rolodex. I have a general contractor, a painter, an electrician, a plumber. When you come here, daycare. Oh, I'll find somebody for you. Dog sitting places or boarding places. Those kind of things that you're local. I mean, you're PCSing from. You're in Arkansas to Warner Robins, Georgia. You don't know anything about the area. I mean, we could Google stuff. Yeah. Right. But Googling stuff and then asking somebody who's on the ground, who has personal experience about this babysitter who recommended you, and now years later, she's still your babysitter. And like you said, family, and all because of a connection from the agent who's local. Right. That's huge. So yeah, finding and interviewing people. Most folks don't interview agents. And I tell people, like, whether it's me or somebody else, you should interview your agent, because it's the largest transaction you'll do in your life. So you should interview them, and to make sure they have your wants and needs. Number one is the priority. Yeah. So interview people. If it's 2 or 3 agents, or maybe it's the first one, you like them. Even if somebody's recommended you to an agent, because if you told me you were moving to Colorado Springs, and then say, "Hey, do you know anybody?" "Oh yeah, I know somebody." So we'll get into a network, and I'll find an agent for you. Usually I interview them, and then ask them questions. How good are you with VA loans, right? What do you know about this and that? How well do you know the area? And then I'll interview them for you and then put you in touch with that agent. And then you can interview them as well. But I've kind of, or most agents will usually vet those referrals before we send them to you guys. So yeah, it's a big process, right? It's hectic. You're PCSing and you got so much stuff going on, and the whole transaction of the sale, right? It's stressful itself. Home inspections, appraisals, getting stuff fixed, packing up, the movers, all that kind of stuff. So another thing I do is, if I was helping you sell your house, one thing I tell you is, hey, I just want you to have the movers pack up and leave. Don't clean the house. I'm going to pay for a cleaner, and then you guys leave, and then the cleaning team comes in behind you and then cleans the house for you. Because the last thing you want to do, and me and my wife have done Diddy moves 3 times. So we have a system. I usually pack the truck, and then room by room, she's cleaning the house, right? But it's a lot of work. I mean, we've done it, but it's a lot of work. But now, you know, when people PCS, I did a listing last year. I said, hey, when you guys are done, just leave. I got a cleaning team. They came in and cleaned the whole house. Cost me a few $100s. I mean, when you sell the $700,000 house, a few $100s is a tax write-off, isn't it? It's a tax write-off. Just like the pictures I take for the house, it's all tax write-off. And most people don't know, when you sell your house here in a few weeks, your commissions that you use to use the agent is also a tax write-off. Did you know that part?
No, I didn't.
So you use the professional service, whether it's an accountant, CPA, or you use somebody professional and you had to pay their services to do something for you, that is a tax write-off. So when you sell your house, you should get a it's called an ALTA, or the final disclosure. It'll have the commission and how much the commissions are in there. Keep that, because when you go to file taxes next year, however much you sell your house for, both commissions, because you paid the commissions on both sides, that is a tax write-off. A lot of people do not know that. So every year, if I help somebody sell their house, like if I help somebody sell their house in 2023, I would text them at the beginning of the year next year, like the IRS code, hey, this is a tax write-off. Anything you did if you had to do stuff to fix the house up to sell it, that's a tax write-off as well. You had to do it to improve it to make the sale go forward. So yeah.
That is super handy information. I never would have even considered that.
Yep. So, you know, when you go to, are you guys selling your house in Georgia?
Yeah, partly because of what you said a minute ago about how much everything is escalated here, because we got in this house right before the prices went nuts, because we got in like mid 2020. So like as prices
before the craziness.
So we actually, this house was a for sale by owner that my agent found for us. So she was actually driving through this neighborhood that we live in to go look at another house, and saw the for sale sign, for sale by owner. She was like, I wonder if they'll talk to me. And she stopped and knocked on the door, and they were totally cool with working with an agent. And she's like, Mike, she's like, out of the houses that you sent me, I think you'll like this one. She's like, but you have to have an open mind, because they're replacing the carpet and they're replacing the flooring. So there was only tile in the house, and everything else was slab. And I was like, I've got a pretty good imagination. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
And everything looked great. They had samples of what they were putting down. So, but yeah, so with how much this thing has increased from then, it makes sense in our particular situation to sell it for where we're going.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other decision is, and you could sit down with the agent and say, if we sold this house, we bought it for 200, and you say you made a bunch of money, say you could sell it for 400 in, 3 years, which is not unheard of. So that 200 extra K is like, whoa, that's a lot of money. I mean, let's just be real, for military folks, I don't care what rank you are, enlisted or officer, 200K is a lot of money. Most military folks, when we talk about closing costs, hey, how you want to do the $15,000 in closing costs? Do you have to bank? No.
Yeah, like 15,000. What are you? Like that's 6 months. That's 6 months salary.
So I always tell people, like, we can finance the closing costs. You wrap it on the backside of the, you're selling it for 400. Let's offer 412, just a number, and then ask for 12,000 in closing costs. You're financing your closing costs. Perfectly legal. It's not illegal. We do it all the time. You just pay for it, right? But yeah, that's a good question because that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and my kids are older. I got a kid in college and one that plays hockey, and hockey's very
Hockey's
expensive.
not cheap.
No, no.
It's
So
not cheap.
yeah, we want to sell it and reap the benefits, and that's perfectly fine. And that's that conversation I would have with people is you want to sell it because here's what you bought it for this X, you can sell it for Y. Here's your profit. I would do a net sheet, a seller net sheet with taxes, commissions, title stuff, and like you bought for 200, you sell them for 400. The commissions are, we'll just say X number of percentage. We're not supposed to have a percentage, right? But let's say it's $15,000. Well, let's see, 24. We'll actually just round it to about 30K. Commissions, taxes, and titles and stuff. We'll just say 30K. So now you're standing the profit 170K. That's life changing for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
So
that is get out of debt money.
Paying off car loans, credit cards, your PCS, and you're going to buy new furniture. Maybe fix up if you're going to buy a house, maybe you don't want to use a VA loan and you want to put money down, or whatever it is, because to make your monthly payments cheaper, because the affordability is gone up for a lot of people. So that's another conversation to have: renting versus, selling your house or renting it out. You bought it for 200, maybe your mortgage payments are about 1,200 a month, but now you can rent it out for about $2,500 a month.
Right.
So that's an extra $1,300 in expeditionary cash every single month. That could be, $1,300 a month, and you keep a renter in there, and you're making extra money. So that could be something that folks want to do too. But if you want to sell it and take the money, like don't be mad and don't apologize. It's your money.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So whenever people are getting ready, let's say the person decides they're going to sell their house. What is and they come to you and they say, well, we think our house is worth this because we saw this online.
The Zestimate?
Yes.
All right. So
I talked about this on my last podcast.
Yeah.
About my opinion of it. So I want to get your opinion on that.
That's great. So the Zestimate, right? I don't think I've met a realtor in America that likes Zillow.
Yes.
Zillow originally was built for taxes. So when you're driving around the neighborhood, you want to see somebody's house and kind of what it's worth, you can look at it. The Zestimate is never accurate. The Zillow CEO is about a couple of years ago sold this house for was either $20,000 or $30,000 less than than the Zestimate. So what the Zestimate does is looks at the tax records. They pull the tax records from the county and then look at your house, and then that's your Zestimate. But they don't know what you've done on the inside. Have you updated your countertops to a quartz or got stainless steel appliances? You got new windows? Have you gone from carpet to hardwood floors? They don't know. Have you built a deck? They don't know that kind of stuff. So I do tell people to get into Zillow. You can claim ownership of your house right there in Georgia. Most people don't know that. You get in there and you got to fill some stuff out to say you're the owner.
Yep. And
you can update some stuff on your house. That does help the Zestimate a little bit. But I just tell people Zillow is a really good tool. It's a great app. It's a great website that showcases houses for sale by agents or by owner. And it's a great tool to go look at it. It's easy to look at, but don't look at the Zestimate. Because definitely when you're trying to buy a house, the Zestimate might be low. And then you're like, well, Zillow says this house isn't worth $400K.
Right.
But the real estate agent, most of us do a great job of running the comps of previously sold houses within the last 6 months in the neighborhood. And then, we would sit down with you and we would sit down with you and I would show you pictures. Hey, Mike, this is the house that sold in the neighborhood in the last 6 months. And I want you to look at this house sold for $375. So we're still going to use that 400K as an example. This house sold for $375. Do you think your house is better, the same, or worse condition wise? Well, obviously you're going to say better. You have a personal vested interest in your house. It's yours. But we would look at pictures and say we'll just say your kitchen's more updated. Your bathrooms are updated. Because what sells in houses? Kitchens and bathrooms.
Every time.
Because I always say sexy is my word. When you go into a house, you're like, master bedroom, it is what it is. But if the kitchen and the bathrooms are sexy, you'll buy it. So yeah, that's what we do is we look at the value of the house, and then I would come up with a value of the house I helped a guy sell his house last year. My assessment was a price that was different than his. He wanted more money because he thought his condo was worth more. And I said, well, here's my number. He goes, it's too low. I want this price. I said, okay, if you're the seller, you dictate the price.
Right.
I said, but let's have a conversation. If it doesn't sell after 2 weeks or 4 weeks, what do we do? Well, we'll have that conversation then. And then it didn't sell for a couple weeks, and we started dropping the price a little bit. When COVID was crazy, the houses were they would go on the market and they'd be gone in hours.
Yeah.
I mean, even early of 2022, houses were gone in hours. We're kind of seeing that trend a little bit this year, especially where I live up here by DC, because there's just no supply. So when a house is on the market, even though interest rates are still high, I still have your PCS into Ohio. Doesn't matter what the interest rate is. You want to buy a house, you have to deal with the interest rate. So supply and demand is at its finest. So we've seen houses still going way over asking, because we had a lender lunch yesterday, and she says, I've seen people still paying $50,000 over for a house. It's just simple economics, supply and demand.
Supply and demand.
But yeah, I mean, you're selling your house, your agent says 400, and you're like, there's no way. Joe down the street sold this house for 410. I want 410. All right, no problem. That's what we're going to do. So a good agent will come up with comps and show you the comps, because our goal is that we want it to appraise.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody can sell their house high. Maybe you want to go 430, and then really you want to get 415. So what I try to do in my listing presentation is say, hey, I know you want to sell for 430. That's fine, but your goal is 415. What if we listed it at 415? All right, good. What if we listed it at 410? Yeah. And then everybody's like, whoa, this house is a little cheaper.
And then they're going to.
You ever been to an auction where it starts high and goes low?
No, you always want to start here and watch it run up. And
it goes up. So that's kind of the goal. You put it maybe a couple grand under of other houses, and it gets some attention. And then you're like, but what happens if we get an offer that's low? Well, you don't have to accept it. Just because somebody gives you an offer, you don't have to accept it. And you can hold on to your house and wait out for a bigger fish.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, good question.
Now, the one thing I do like about Zillow is it puts a lot of information in one place that isn't necessarily related directly to the house.
Yes.
Like as parents, if you're like, hey, what are the schools like in this area?
Yep.
You can scroll down a little bit and you'll see what schools that house is zoned for and the ratings for the school. I actually like that aspect of it more than seeing the pricing personally.
So when I got into this business, you're a military spouse, and how old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
They're 10 and 9.
So schools are more important than anything.
100%.
So I worked on the team. It was just pretty much me and him. We were trying to build it, and military folks would move over here, like Mike, because I live in DC. Fairfax County School is one of the top 5 rated schools in America, the county. And they're like, I want that county, and I want that high school, for example. I want that high school in that city. You find me a house. Gotcha. And I would find the school, and I would draw a map for just that high school. All right, you're looking for 3 bedrooms, blah, blah, blah. I would find the house. And my team leader was like, that's backwards. I'm like, not for you, but for military folks. We've lived in, not just me, but I've lived in Alabama. I've lived in Mississippi. I've lived in Hawaii, and the school systems are awful. Yeah. So when you come to a place where the school districts are good, that's where you're going to find a house. So the more important thing is the schools. This, I feel, for military spouses or military folks, schools are most important. And then now I'll find a house. And he was like, well, that's backwards. I'm like, yeah, but you've lived here your whole life. You're used to good schools. It doesn't bother you. Yeah.
Whenever we were looking for our house in Ohio, because of the way the schools are up there, we knew what schools were our number one. And so we knew that, and this is, again, the military family lifestyle. We already knew that to get into this neighborhood, we were going to have a little bit smaller house, and it was going to be a little bit more expensive. But the schools are second to none in that whole, because it's Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah, I know.
So we moved. So we found a house in Oakwood, which is a little bit older neighborhood, but the schools are phenomenal. They're like, it's got a number, like the high school is rated like 10 out of 10. And I was like, I've never even seen that.
Yeah. So what's the trade-off, right? Up here,
Mhm.
there's a, close to the Pentagon is Arlington and Alexandria.
Right.
Older, way more expensive houses.
Mhm.
But you get down to where I am further south, like my wife commutes about 45 minutes to work because I live on the south side of my city, but our
Okay.
school districts are phenomenal.
Yeah.
The high schools my kids are in, or my son was in, he's hearing impaired. So it just so happened that we found out the middle school and high school had specialty for kids with hearing impaired, and a lot of deaf kids go to the
nice.
school. So that was just even more overwhelming.
Mhm.
We found a school that worked for that. That takes the stress off of parents, that they have services for deaf and hard of hearing kids. So that was great, and just turns out the schools are really good.
Mhm.
So that's the $1 million question: is where do I live and how far do I commute? So let's say
Right.
your Ohio is, for your wife, she has to drive 30 minutes, but you're in one of the best school districts for your kids. Is that a great trade-off? It might be for your family. It was for ours. That's
Mhm.
not the same for everybody. Maybe your kids are in elementary and okay, elementary, my kids in second and third grade, not a big deal.
Right.
But high schools are, middle school and high schools are very important. That finding that great neighborhood is key. It's in the, you guys found it. That's way more. Yeah. So my house is a little bit smaller. We're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But my kids are in a great school, so you know what? That stress is gone out of my mind because my kids are in a great school.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
huge stressor.
Yeah, that's
Probably, probably bigger than where we got to pack up and go. Is, oh my gosh, we got to find a school, and then you find one, you're like, whew.
Yeah, PCSing was easier whenever my kids weren't in school because then it didn't really matter where we lived. It's like, oh no, I like that house.
Yeah, and we lived on base. My kids were in kindergarten and first grade. I'm like, we'll be fine. We'll live on base, and they can go to the school on base. It's
Right.
it's elementary school, right? They're trying to figure out how to write their name and color.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the person decided to list their house. What are some common mistakes that you see people make when they're getting ready to list their house for sale?
Ooh, common mistakes. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm trying to think of common mistakes. Not making the house, what's the word I want to use? Not necessarily moving ready, because sometimes the house can't be moving ready. How about freshening it up?
Okay.
Does it need a, don't paint the whole entire house, because I tell people don't paint the whole house, because you might think that the color brown, I think everybody has a brown or a tan house up here. You might like that color, but the next person that comes in might not like it. So they're going to repaint it. So don't waste your time going through and repainting the whole house. Now, if you want to paint it, gray's the new white. Gray makes everything. Yes, I know, I see it. You can see actually this tan color behind my head. So many houses up here have the same color tan. I feel like Home Depot had gallons of paint on sale. Now, is painting my house gray? It is going to make it look bigger. It's going to make it look newer, but that's not going to make somebody like, oh my gosh, I love it, because they might not like gray. So maybe just if you have a wall with some scuff marks, freshening it up, cleaning the house, decluttering the house. I always tell people, take all your personal artifacts off the wall. I don't want to walk through the house and see pictures of your family. I do as the buying agent, I do, because I'm going to use that to help me negotiate. We were looking at a house, and the guy was a big gun guy, AR-15s, and I was like, hey, when we go to write the contract, put it in the contract, you'll buy him an AR-15. Right. Like then they decided not to, but I was like, let's make it personal on their side. Or if they're military, I try to reach that connection. So take the pictures down, declutter your rooms, take a lot of stuff out of your rooms to make it look bigger. What's another one? That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of mistakes that people use or don't sell. You have to be very flexible. So you're good in the process of selling your house, and you have to be very flexible. You have to get it ready. So declutter everything, pack stuff up. And I know it sounds weird, but put it in a closet.
Yeah.
Take stuff out of your bedrooms and put it in your closet. I mean, they might open the door and look in the closet, but just make the rooms appear bigger. So less clutter. But you have to be flexible for the showings. So I always tell people, like, when the busyness was going on, you got to be gone all day Saturday. I got 8
Right.
showings all day. So I would give them like, here's $100 in a gift card. Go eat lunch or go hang out somewhere. Go to DC and look at the museums for the whole day. Just be gone. One family, they went and stayed at a hotel. They went down to like Virginia Beach and they were gone for the whole weekend. And we had a lot of showings for the whole weekend. So they went down there and hung out with some family down there for the whole entire weekend. So, that made it easy because when people want to go see the house, it's free all day. Because I would coordinate, hey, Mike, somebody wants to come see the house at 2:00. Is that good? You're like, I'm doing this podcast with this agent guy at 2:15. Can we do 3:00? So I always tell people be flexible. That's one of the big things is be flexible for the showings.
Yeah.
If you have dogs, put them in a cage, right? Or put them in a boarding place. Hide stuff. If it's jewelry, guns, expensive things like that, and I'm not saying people steal when they walk through houses, but they will open the drawers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they will go to the bathroom in your house, right? I've seen it many a times. Oh man, I got to go to the bathroom. What am I going to say when the kid has to go to the bathroom?
Right.
We're kind of not supposed to, but it happens.
Yeah.
So just be flexible and try to declutter and get rid of as much as you can in the house. So, people come in, they want to, look around and like your house and enjoy it. And I always tell people too, like every buyer's not going to be the right person for your house. You have to understand that.
Right.
Don't take it personal. Like everybody comes in, oh, it's not big enough, or it's too big, or it's too small. And I was hoping for a different kitchen. You can't make every buyer happy. It is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So same question, but for the other side of it. So like somebody's getting ready to buy a house.
Okay.
What are some missteps that you see potential buyers making?
Wants versus needs. So
Okay.
I heard you're a power lifter. So your house, something you might need if you don't go to a gym, you might need a garage where you can store your Atlas stones, your what are they called, yokes, where you can lift the big heavy stuff, that kind of stuff. I'm still kind of helping a guy. And one of the things he's looking for in the garage is like, I need to be able to lift my yoke. Like I need it this high. I have Atlas stones, things like that. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this garage will work.
Right.
Or the backyard or something. So wants versus needs. Like, do I need 4 bedrooms when I can get away with 3? And then price. Everybody, I don't ever try to show somebody a house that they can't afford.
Right.
So you see it all the time on TV, right? Like, oh, this house is outside of your budget by $50K. Well, then why did you show me?
Right.
Like, don't get me excited and fall in love with a house that I can't afford it. So if your budget is at $500K, well, I'm not going to show you houses for over that. Doesn't make any sense. I don't want to get you guys excited. So some people, they have to stay within their budget, and that's a want versus need. Like, okay, our max is $500K. I see houses for $550. Well, you can't afford it. Don't be house poor. Other things people make mistakes is they do things like once they get under contract is change jobs or go buy stuff. I tell people like, when you're under contract, don't do anything. Don't spend cash. Don't buy anything until after closing. Then you can go buy whatever you want. That's a big mistake people do too. Is once they're under contract, they want to go buy stuff, but they have to be flexible as a buyer. And I tell them the same thing. Hey, listen, we're going to go in the house. It might not be for you, but once we get there, and I tell them, don't feel bad if we get into a house and after 2 minutes, you're like, yeah, this isn't it. Right. I'm not buying it. I'm not living there and I'm not paying the mortgage. So you're not going to upset me if we go into a house and you're like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. Well, then let's go. But just understand that every house you look at isn't going to be for you and your family. And it took us, I think we looked at probably 20 houses, and I had to fly back up here to DC area and was up here by myself and video touring with my wife and looked at even more houses. And then we found this one. You just have to be patient. Sometimes it's a one-hit wonder. You find one, you're like, we love it. Sometimes it's 20 houses, and I'd rather show you 20 houses and you find the one than show you 5 and you're like, you know what, we're just done. Let's just find one. And because you're not going to be happy. You want to come home, it's your house, it's your dwelling, you want to be happy when you get home and your wife gets home from work, you want to be happy. So
I actually had patience listed right underneath that about being patient.
Oh my God. And then like we're getting back to these multiple contracts again, like because of supply and demand. And I mean, I can look up the stats in Wright Pat or Dayton, and I bet you it's probably the same. It's simple supply and demand. There's 400 houses for sale, but there's 900 people looking to buy houses. So it's simple supply and demand. So patience is huge. Like, hey man, we're going to write some contracts and we're probably going to lose, but how much are you willing to, like, what's your, how much, if the house is for 500, are you willing to go 515? Are you willing to go 520? What's your drop dead? I have to have this house price,
right?
So patience is huge. That's a good one. Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned something about not looking at houses outside of your budget. Would you recommend people talk to a mortgage lender first and get pre-approved? That way they don't go into a house thinking, well, I can afford a $400,000 house, but then they do their finances and the lender's like, no, you can afford a $275,000 house.
Yeah. So if you called me, hey, Mike, we're moving to DC and I want you to help me find a house. Me and you are going to have an interview, some wants versus needs. I'm going to write down a bunch of stuff. Like, what are you guys looking for? And I'm going to build you a search. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in touch with, I'm going to ask you, do you have a lender? Then I'm going to ask you, if you don't, I have a few lenders that I recommend because I've done transactions with them and I know what they can close a loan. Sometimes time is of the essence.
Right.
And with the craziness of COVID, sometimes it was like, well, how fast can you guys close the deal? Oh, 21 days. Great. Because the other people are 30 days.
Right.
But a good lender is more important than the realtor because the financing is the biggest piece of the puzzle. So there's a lot of people where they think they get in like, oh yeah, 400s are a thing. But then when the lender gets in and they look at their debt to ratio income, and I think the VA loan is like 54%.
Yep. Something like that.
Ratio. Because we don't want you to be house poor. It's not, you can't afford it, but when they see student loans and car loans and, childcare, like you can't afford to live in this house because you're going to be eating ramen or macaroni and cheese forever. Everybody's credit, a lot of people are like, oh, my credit score is 750. And then they look at it like, well, it's actually 710, just throwing out numbers. But sometimes your credit score changes your financing. It changes your APR. Most people don't know that. It'll change your APR. But yeah, absolutely. That's the next thing I'm going to do is send it to a lender. You're going to talk to them and you're going to fill out the questions. And then she's going to come back and say, hey, Mike, him and his family, they're good for, 400. But that's the first part. Because I tell people, I don't care what your finances are. It doesn't bother me. I don't care if you have a ton of money in IRA. It doesn't bother me. All I need to know is how much you're approved for. And then you're going to tell me, the lender will tell me, hey, I'm good for 400. Boom, here we go. Now I got my top, my limit, is 400. Now we start looking at houses from whatever, let's say 2 to 400. That might be a big range, but we can narrow it, and bedroom, we can, narrow it and make that search. We can refine it a bunch. But yeah, you got to talk to a lender. And now you used to have pre-qualified, like you get your credit card stuff in the mail. Hey, you're pre-qualified for $3,000 credit card. So there's pre-qualified, then there's pre-approved.
Yep.
So pre-approved is great because when you go into Wright Pat and your agent's going to be like, oh, you guys pre-approved. Here's your pre-approval letter. So when you like a house and you want to put an offer, you're going to need a pre-approval letter. Just shows that you're approved for X number of dollars. What a lot of lenders are doing now is we're called a pass pre-approval, like you're in underwriting, which will speed the loan up even more. So you're working with a lender in the area. You've already finished all this process. You're into the underwriting part of it. Now you can close a loan. I've had loans close in 14 days because they're past that pre-approval part. And that's huge because you can get a loan done faster, which is great for the seller. They get their money faster.
Right.
The buyer gets in the house faster. It just speeds the whole process up. Because you're excited, you're buying a house and you want to get the deed done and get the keys and it's yours. And then now you got that part of your PCS done. Got the house, we got the schools. Now we just need the folks to come in and pack our stuff up and move. And there's that stress too. Yeah, I tell people, I try to make the process as fun as possible because it is one of the top 5 most stressful things you'll do is buy a house. And I try to make it as fun as possible because it should be a fun process. But the lending side of it is more important than anything else. If you don't have a good lender, and There's some few companies out there that have really good TV commercials, but they can't get a loan done in 30 to 40 days. I can't get in trouble for this, but I think Navy Fed's not very good. USA has all my stuff. They're not as good for home loans. Local lenders are probably your best bet.
Yeah.
Because I could pick up the phone on Sunday and call my local lender and say, hey, we've been looking at houses all day. I need a pre-approval for this address in this price. Oh, well, give me 15 minutes, Mike.
Yep.
And then boom, it's sent to me on a Sunday. I can't call some of those companies who are open Monday through Friday and get a pre-approval. And maybe the deadline's Sunday night.
Right.
And here we are Sunday at 2:00. And I've gotten offers. I'm driving, call my lender. Mike, give me 5 minutes. I'm sending it to you. Boom. And then I get an email with a pre-approval letter. Yeah. And then I go home and write and I get it that fast. So that's huge. That's huge. And the local lenders are very, very important. I mean, not to be mean, but local lenders, they benefit the money more than sending it to the big company. It's kind of like using an agent, and you're using a local agent to sell your house. So who benefits more from selling your house, a local agent or the company that sells houses? And I mean, they're worth $4 billion. To them, they're nothing. But the local agent using, that's money to feed her family, grow her business. Because we work on a referral-based service, and obviously your agent down there has been good. So if somebody moves to Georgia, you're going to recommend her.
I drop her name all the time, especially on the spouses pages. People are like, hey, I'm looking for a realtor. Like, here you go.
Yeah, that's huge because you've had a great experience with them. So she did good for me. She's going to do good for everybody else I recommend. Yep. And it's the same thing for lenders. Like I have a couple that I use because they've done such a great job. And they're local. I had lunch with one yesterday. Great lady, very knowledgeable, been in the business for 30 years. So I know if I call, hey, Mike and them are going to buy a house, how fast can we close? Oh, what's today? They've done this. Hey, 21 days from now, we'll say May 24th. Oh, holy cow, that's fast. And I put that in. So I know that loan's going to close provided you send all the documents and you're supposed to. But yeah, that's huge. That's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, we actually, our realtor in Ohio, she did the same thing as our realtor here. She was like, hey, here's a list. And it's on the podcast that I did about buying a house. I told her, look, interview the brokers.
Yes.
If you like, the first person I talked to, me and him just clicked. We had a great conversation, and I still talked to another one, and I never heard back from the third one.
So you're a consumer, right? So interest rates are huge, but maybe you got two companies. One says interest rate is 5.75, the other 6. But maybe the guy that has a lower APR, they're charging you $4,000 to do the loan. So now your loan is actually higher. And I work with companies whose fees are almost zero lending fees, or sometimes very, very small. Maybe you're 100% disabled veteran. There's in Virginia, your VA funding fees waived. So that's thousands of dollars that people save. So you have to shop your consumer. Who's going to give you the best rate? Who's going to give you the lowest fees? I talked about one of those mortgage companies. I have paperwork we can show you that they've charged $15,000 to do a loan, just to do the loan. And I've had other people charge you $600. So as a consumer, what's best? Yeah, their commercials are awesome. They're funny, but deep down inside, where's it going to save you money? And it's it might be that $600 guy is going to save you money. Yeah, it's a simple economics, but you're a consumer. Jump around.
Yeah, I like the mortgage company we went with, because they actually called me. I've talked to him on the phone about just making sure things are going the right direction almost as much as I've talked to my realtor up there.
And I always tell people, like, hey, we're under contract. I think we're back to mostly getting home inspections again.
Yeah.
And then after
I've got one today. Guy's supposed to be here at 2:00.
There you go. So that's great to have home inspections back. After the home inspection, I'll say, hey man, there's not much else for us to do. So for the next couple weeks, it might be quiet, but don't freak out if I don't talk to you every day. There's not much for us to do, because now the lender's going to ask you questions. I need this document, this document, this document. And if you delay that, by even a couple of days, it could delay closing on the backside. So when the lender emails and says, hey, Mike, we need, whatever it is, I got to drop what I'm doing and get it in.
He did that.
You will talk to your lender, or not necessarily your lender, maybe your underwriter.
Yeah.
or the loan officer. You'll talk to those guys a lot. Yep.
Yeah. They called me Monday. I was at my daughter's volleyball practice and they're like, hey, our processor needs these 3 things.
Yep.
And he even said, look, it can wait until tomorrow because I know it's kind of late, but they needed a copy of my wife's orders. I had that in a file on my phone.
So the orders are important because of BAH.
Yeah, that's what they needed it for. So they needed that. And there was like 2 other things they needed. And I was like, you know what? I've got access to that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and send it because I don't want to be the one that they're waiting on. I don't want them to say, you know what, this has been going great, but Mike's being a jerk right now and he's not getting our stuff. So if there is any hiccups and I've been on Johnny on the spot with everything, they're more likely to flatten that hiccup out as opposed to now this is really a big deal because you haven't been reliable getting me your information.
Absolutely. And then, maybe after a couple of days, they can't get a hold of Mike and they're like, they'll call me and be like, hey,
Yep.
hey, can you call them because we need these documents and they're not sending them in. And then I'll text you or call you and be like, hey, I told you when the lender, you got to get that stuff in because you can delay your closing by a day or 2. And that could make the seller upset. I mean, I had a person, we had to delay closing because of mortgage insurance or homeowners insurance. That's, most people don't even realize that's huge. You got to have homeowners insurance.
Yep.
So, and some lenders actually they shop homeowners insurance for you, but you got to have that stuff in. That can delay your closing too by a couple of days. It happened to me once. We had the buyers forgot to do their homeowners insurance and we had to delay closing 3 days. Yep.
I'm actually at that process now. I'm comparing rates on homeowners insurance now so I can get that turned in.
I could text you a place offline and they shop a bunch of insurance companies throughout the United States, and they could save you, let's say $1,000 in a year. That's a lot of money. That is
a lot of money.
$100 a month off your mortgage. Because that goes into your mortgage and your escrow. They pay it that way. So that's a bunch of money. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so we've talked about mistakes people make when they're listing a house
and
buying a house. What is something that you definitely would recommend to people when they are listing their house? Like, what do you think is something that people really need to focus on when they're getting ready to list? I know we talked about declutter, we talked about depersonalize and making sure the house is clean. Is there anything else, or those your main 3?
So what are you guys PCSing? I mean, is your house already on the market right now?
We're under contract.
Okay. And then when are you guys PCSing?
So we will actually PCS. She final outs in June. So we're moving in June.
A month from now.
Yep.
So up here, a lot of people we're under contract. I had a house last year. We were under contract middle of April, but our schools don't get out up here till middle of June. So everybody was doing rent backs.
Okay.
So they had to sell their house, get the profit, and then on the PCS side, use that money to buy a house. So we had to be under contract, had to sell the house before you can be under contract on another. There's some contingencies you can do, but you want to sell your house, be under contract, and then it helps you buy the other side. So we would do a rent back. So legally, they can do a rent back for 60 days. So we were under contract middle of April. They PCS'd in the middle of June. They had 2 months of rent back, and everybody was giving it back last year, the year before for free. So you were a rent, you sold your house and then you were a renter and you got to live there for free for 2 months. As a buyer, I know I'm paying mortgage for 2 months. I get it, but I got a house I need, and everybody was doing it. And we would tell people like they can't PCS until June because our kids don't get out of school until middle of June. Then the movers were coming and stuff. But I mean, it works out. But you have to, you have to figure out how long after we close do the movers come? Because once you get orders, next thing you got to call is TMO.
Yep.
Hey, she finals out on May 30th. Do we want the movers to come before then?
Right.
Or after then, and then are we going to stay in a hotel for a few days? You're going to stay in lodging on base, or, that whole game planning part of it, and then are you doing a door-to-door move? Or maybe we did Diddy moves. We packed the truck up ourselves. Right? I don't know if we'll do it again, but it's money making. You can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You got to strategize that part of it. And that comes into your whole selling is the flexibility again is doing that. So I think when you're selling it and then after you're under contract is, now it's not your house and you still have to take care of it because they can come back after you for damages.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other tough part. The other thing is like, what about a for sale by owner? Have you guys thought about that? That's I think people, if they realize it's not super hard to sell a house, but the difference between you selling it and me selling it is the exposure.
Right.
You're going to put it on Zillow. You can do a for sale by owner. You put it on some military spouses pages, and you're going to get a few people. You might find somebody, but when you list it with an agent, it goes out to 300 to 800 different websites, realtors, Zillow, all the local agents in the area are getting the specifications about that house, and it's reaching so many more. It's just reaching so many more people. So it's like going to Vegas. We always tell people like, yeah, you can sell your house and you can make some money, but if you use me, like you're going to get more exposure. Everybody can go to Vegas and not everybody's going to win. But if everybody went to Vegas and won, Vegas wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
So if everybody could sell their house, then real estate agents wouldn't exist.
The way I look at it is like y'all know the paperwork and like all that the contract stuff.
Yep.
Because if I screw that up, then that can come back to bite me. But if I give it to somebody else and that knows what they're doing, that is less stress on me as a whole.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have the paperwork, and I usually walk people through the contract. Like, we get busy, and I actually had somebody, hey, can you walk me through the contract? And I was like, oh, wow. I actually never thought about that. And we went, it's 38 different paragraphs.
Yeah.
And I went through each one. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I was like, well, that's good, because sometimes I need a refresher in my brain on why sometimes we assume that you've sold houses before and no, it's paperwork, let's go. But there's some legalities in there. Like if things don't happen in time or the buyer messes up, like we can go after them legally, right? Because they have their side of the contract they gotta hold it to. The other side of the lender, and then you also have if you're selling, we have, you and I are selling, we have the title company.
Yeah.
Title company is huge too. And there's title companies out there that are all over, but the company that I use, they're actual attorneys. So they know the law. And if something comes up, I have a lawyer that represents you, not just a title person, but they're an actual attorney. So if we have to go to court or get a lawyer involved, it's already included in your fees. So there's nothing extra. So that's the paperwork side of it's humongous. Now I did help a military spouse. They sold their house down in Florida, and I walked them through the whole process with all the paperwork, and they found an attorney down there to expedite the closing. But the rest of the stuff they did on their own. I actually looked up. I gave them the price, and then they were asking me a bunch of questions, and I helped them through the whole process. So you can sell your house on your own, absolutely. Is it easy? Nah, not really. But what's the exposure you're looking for? Where are you going to put it out at? So Facebook, you're going to put on Instagram, on the military Facebook pages, there's the places we move, and there's a few other, you can put them out there. But
was it military for sale by owner?
Yeah, military for sale by owner.
And AHRN, the automated.
AHRN, that's actually a really good site. Military by owner is a really good website, and you could list your house on there and pay for the pictures. There's Facebook pages, right? Where we move or whatever, where we live is actually a lot of people are on there. So you can do it on your own, but when you get into the paperwork side, you're right. If you mess up some stuff and the buyer on the other side has an agent and the lawyers, the seller could be liable for a bunch of money. So that's why I think it's important to have an agent, have a title company, just to protect your backside. You don't want to get in trouble, a couple months after you close or in the process, something happens, you want to be protected because it's it can be a lot of money, legal fees and attorney fees, and it gets crazy.
That is why we use real estate agents. I am not the people that were selling this house as a for sale by owner. They actually had to get our agent to help them with the paperwork because they didn't really. And she even told like, look, there's only so much I can tell you.
Yes.
So she gave them like the most help she was legally able to give them.
Yeah.
Just so they could get through the paperwork stuff because she didn't want them to get bid on the back end.
So there was my first sale. She was a renter. And then I started talking to her. I'm like, why are you renting? Like, I think for the same amount of money you're renting, you can buy. And she ended up buying a condo. And so I called the agent and we talked. right? And just like I'm talking to you, like, hey, Mike, man, my guy really loves your house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got the deal. And then while I'm writing a contract, I say, hey, I'm gonna be honest with you. I've never written a contract. They don't teach you that in real estate school. They don't
Huh.
teach you about writing a contract. They teach us everything to stay out of jail. They teach us about race, equity,
Right.
gender, religion, all the stuff for me to stay out of jail. They don't teach me how to write a contract.
Interesting.
So that you get your license, you get into a brokerage, you're like, cool, have fun. You're like, wait, how do I write a contract? What happens after a home inspection? How do we negotiate that? What's an appraisal contingency, right? All these little things. So I told him, I said, dude, I've never written a contract. I'm gonna be honest with you. He goes, all right, man, let's work it out. And then we were on the phone together. I actually joined his team after that because we had a good transaction.
Right.
And I've gotten some transactions based off my personality because the guy's like, man, you seem like you want to be easy to work with. I'm like, yeah, let's not make this process harder, because then it's harder for you to buy a house, you know, and we want to make this process as easy as possible. So I have had to handhold people, and still to this day, VA loans are the most difficult loans to deal with now. Right.
Really?
A lot of agents don't know the backside of VA loans. There's things in a VA loan. If it comes in low, we can enact a tidewater, so we can try to get it raised, the appraisal raised. Most people think you got to have a home inspection with a VA loan. You don't. You just got to have an appraisal. Right. Because the federal government is backing your loan like an FHA loan. They're backing your loan. They want to make sure that it is worth the $400K you're paying for. They want to make sure it's worth $400K. So a lot of agents, I mean, we've heard stories like, oh, we don't want to accept the VA loan because they're just too difficult. What are you talking about? They close at a higher rate than a conventional loan.
Right.
Most people don't know that. So because they hear a VA loan, the appraisal, and they come in low. And so agents have, and I've had agents deny loans based off, oh, it's a VA loan. So that's actually discriminating, right? So that could be a lawsuit because you're discriminating against my client just based off the loan they're using. So, excuse me, that's very sad and at the time, a lot of veterans were losing out on loans based off just because it was a VA loan. So we're getting discriminated against, and there have been some legal actions taken against agents based on, you know, them saying, well, we just denied your loan because the VA loans are too difficult. Really?
Huh.
So it's sad because agents just aren't educated on the VA loan. Like, you know, you're allowed so much money on the backside, like after closing. If you got extra credits, the seller gives credits, right? What can you do with those credits? Well, you can pay off your HOA dues for a year. You can pay off credit cards. You can pay off stuff like that. There are some things you can do with the VA loan that are awesome, but if the agents aren't very well versed on the loan, and it's bad. And a lot of it's just sad they're not educated about VA loans. So
I honestly think that
problem.
We almost had the exact opposite, I feel, because whenever we were moving to, our lender very well versed in VA loans, and we were in one of those multi-contract situations. So it was us, and it was like 2 or 3 other contracts that the seller was looking at. And I said we got that house because of 2 things. We looked at the house the day before it hit the market, and she was a little bit older lady, and we had our kids with us, and we're like, we have cute kids, and she liked our kids.
Well, I mean, it's sometimes that stuff helps. And
the other one was because we were using a VA loan, and our lender was like, look, y'all's loan is pretty much guaranteed to close. And I think the listing agent understands that and is probably pointing that out. Like, not necessarily saying you have to use a VA loan, but like, look, the percentage of a VA loan making it to close is higher.
Oh, it's 63% of VA loans close. I know that might not seem like a high number, but there's so many other factors that come on the backside. But conventional loans are closing at a little bit lower rate, a little less percentage. And most people don't know that. So some things that people have done is write a contract using a conventional loan. And once you're under contract, changing the financing from conventional to VA loan.
Huh.
Because when you're multiples and people see that VA loan, they get scared. So if as me as a listing agent, I tell people like, oh, this is a VA loan. I'll call the lender.
Right.
Your lender is Mike. Hey, Mike. Hey, I'm the listing agent. Your people are writing a contract, you know, and I know they're using a VA loan. You know, are they good to go? Oh yeah, absolutely. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, great. And if I know the lending company and they're reputable, I'm not worried about it. If they're past that pre-approval stage, it's
Right.
going to close. But we call and verify that your funds are good and you can pay for it. After that, it's just, yeah, it's easy. And the appraisal, we had folks last year, they had to put an appraisal gap in because you have to have an appraisal with a VA loan. So we went way over on the house because that's what the market was still doing last March. And they had to put a $20,000 appraisal gap in. Well, the appraisal came in, it was actually really low. And me and the other agent, the listing agent, did a great job of working the other comps in the neighborhood. And we got the value of the house raised, but it still came in $14,000 low. So they had to kick in the cash, which they almost kind of walked. And he's like, no, I understand. But by the time I actually move in the house, the value of the house, they've had it for a year. The value of the house has already gone up way more than $14,000. So they're on the plus side.
Nice.
Yeah, so it works out, but you have to have an appraisal. And if there's no gap, so say your house, you're buying it for 400, you put an offer in for 400 and the appraisal comes back at 390. So there's a few things that you guys have to do. Is the seller willing to drop the price? Are you guys going to walk away, or are you guys going to meet in the middle? Right? There's your three options right there. I know there's a fourth and I'm not a brain for it right now, but most of the time the seller will drop the price, or you're going to be like, hey, we want this house this much. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? 5K, right? Offered 400. It came in a value at 390. Now we're at 395. And you can go back to the VA. We've actually had VA, the lender I was working with, this is why I love her. They wrote a letter to the VA claiming hardship for a veteran if they don't buy a house. The loan came in like 30K low.
Oh, wow.
They wrote a letter saying like how hard it is for veterans to buy a house because of what the market's doing. The VA actually raised the value of the loan to meet the asking price.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it definitely can happen. You just if your lender's good, you can. So your house in Ohio, let's say the appraisal comes in low, and the VA's like, no, we're not budging 390. You can maybe write a letter saying, no, we need it for this because of hardships for our family. This is the only schools we can find.
Right.
There's no inventory. So what are you going to do? So you claim all these things as a hardship, and sometimes the VA will increase the value of the home.
Yeah, we actually got really lucky. We just got our appraisal back on the Ohio house. We actually the appraisal came in over what the agreed on price was.
So we got
lucky there.
You've already gained equity and haven't even got the keys yet.
Exactly. Well, and it was funny. It was really funny. There was two things that the appraiser said that they had to fix before it's like final. And both the things are like super cosmetic. It's like, really, that does nothing to the structure of the house at all.
What were the two things?
So you know how sometimes, especially with older homes that have basements, they'll have a little bit of cinder block that's stick up, and they basically have like that stucco cover over it.
Yep.
That stucco is strictly cosmetic. It does nothing. Yep. Some of that was chipped off.
Yep.
And they have to fix that, and then they had to paint the bottom of the door jamb to the garage door.
That does nothing to.
I was like, "Are you serious?"
They just, and most people think that when you get an appraiser, a VA appraiser, that guy he'll have a VA loan appraisal at 9 o'clock in the morning, and 11 he'll have a conventional loan, and at 2 he'll have an FHA. The same appraiser will do 3 different types of contracts. So they're just out there appraising a house, and they write a detailed report on what needs to be fixed in the house. That's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
I lost a contract. We bought a house and put an offer in on it. Not us, the clients. Right, and it came back really low, $40,000 low, because the outside of the house needed to be painted. That's why they appraised it low. And I was like, well, you're just saying that the color of the house, and it didn't need to be painted, but
come on.
It was fine. But you appraised, and I was so furious. I lost over like $1.2 million in sales. I was helping them buy and sell, and I lost both contracts because of that. And I fought all the way up to it's Loan Depot. There's 2 like loan people in the country, and we fought appraisals all the way up, and like, you are devaluing this home based on a paint job. Yeah, like this is, and they were a new appraiser, so we were furious, and then they cost me a lot of money. But yeah, that shouldn't be why a house doesn't appraise. It's cosmetic. Okay, fine, I'll pay $5,000 for somebody to paint the house.
Right.
Yeah, and
people are crazy.
It doesn't. And maybe I want the house to be crappy paint. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, man, I can't. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I can't really. Is there anything else that you think we're missing, like that you want people to know?
No, I think I mean PCS, like we talked about, is a very stressful time. Absolutely. If I always tell people, if you can, like your house in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
if you can afford to keep your house in Georgia and rent it out, and your agent would be like, hey, if you rented it, your mortgage is 1,500, you can rent it for
Mm-hmm.
25. Oh, cool. That's an extra $1,000 a month. Could pay for daycare, a
Right.
private school, a car payment. I don't know, but you can keep it and keep gaining equity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're PCS and back to the area. A lot of people in the Pentagon recycle back through.
Yeah, it's true.
I had a client, they were renters. They came to me like, oh, we want to buy the house. I helped them buy the house. They bought it for 450, sold it for 615 2 years
Mm-hmm.
later.
Oh, wow.
So they talked about selling. I said, well, here's the sticker shock. You bought it for
Mm-hmm.
this. You're going to sell it for this. She goes, yeah, we were going to rent it. And I gave them rental prices.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I told them how much they can sell it for, they were like, whoa, wait, what? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah. And actually, the price kept increasing from when we first talked about it to the actual sale.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they profited almost 150K after everything was sold.
That's
And they were like, this is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
they wanted to rent it. And they were like, for that much money, we're
Mhm.
selling. So, but honestly, if you can keep it and rent it out, and it's just it's you're building your portfolio. It's the
Mhm.
equity you can gain down the road longer. That's a good idea. But no matter what, it's your guys' decision to buy or rent, even on the PCS side. Sometimes renting is the best option. Maybe you're only going to be there for a year. It just depends. But whatever's best for your family, you got to sit down and decide. I'm not a fan of renting
Mhm.
because I'm paying somebody else's mortgage. Knowing what I know now, as much as we PCS, I would have
Mhm.
tried to buy a house everywhere. Now my wife's been in since 2000 and oh my gosh, 2002.
Okay.
So then you had the market crash in 2008, which nobody would have
Yeah.
predicted. That part sucked, but since then, things have gone up. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've been to some hot spots like Colorado, California, Alabama, where people go to school a lot. Hawaii, gosh, I would
Yeah.
have showed a house in Hawaii, especially we were there in 2015 and 16. If we had bought a house in Hawaii and then kept it, oh, geez,
Right.
that is unreal. But it's hard to afford.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just do your homework, figure out what's best for your family.
Mhm.
If you're going to sell, don't be afraid to interview agents on both sides, selling and
Yeah.
buying. Unless you've worked with your agent in the past, lending. Don't be afraid to interview lendings. Like you're a consumer. Like this is like buying a car. What's the best car dealership? Even though you're looking at the same Chevy, maybe that dealership down the road doesn't charge that $1,000 delivery fee, and that's it's
Right.
$1,000. And then just do your due diligence.
Mhm.
If you're getting a home inspection, I love home inspections. It just gives you an idea of what the bones of the house are worth, or not worth,
Right.
but what the structure of the house is. It good? Maybe
Mhm.
you get up into the attic and find out that the roof needs to be replaced. But you wouldn't find that out without a home inspection.
Right.
There's other little things that pop up all the time, like it wasn't PVC pipe, it was a different kind of plastic pipe underneath that builders were using. And in
Oh,
our
yeah.
I'll think polybutylene
Yep.
pipes.
I think that's exactly what it was. The polybutylene pipes were cracking.
Yeah, your grandfather did, but a home inspector would find that out.
Mhm.
The government was giving people money back to replace those pipes, but a lot of people didn't replace them. But a home
Right.
inspector would find that stuff out. Maybe a foundation has some cracks or something that you can get fixed. But yeah, do your due diligence when you're buying a house. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a humongous purchase, and just yeah, that's it. I think we covered a pretty good basis there.
I would agree with you. Well, I'm not going to keep you because, like I said, I've got my own home inspection. This is actually the
There you go.
second one because we were under contract and then they backed out on like the last day of their due diligence. But then we were under contract on the very next day. So
That's a good point. So here's something with COVID. I know we'll back up just a quick second.
okay.
As a listing agent, so let's say Mike's put a contract in for a house and they waive home inspection because, right, you have 4 reasons you can back out of a loan: home
Mhm.
inspection, financing, appraisal, and if you live in an HOA. So
Mhm.
those are the 4 reasons I could back out of a loan. So let's say you guys bought a house, but we waived our home inspections for
Mhm.
the right to negotiate. which means
Okay.
you're doing your home inspection today. They come in and find out an area of the roof needs to be replaced. Fine, we'll fix it. That's the negotiating part. Or you could say, hey, instead of us fixing it, I'll give you $3,000.
Right.
And you can write it into the contract and it comes off the sale. And then they fix it, maybe. But they can fix it. It's up to them.
Yeah.
Like the
not my
owners
problem anymore.
Yeah, not your problem. They sign the paperwork.
Yep.
But if they said, we're going to waive our right to negotiate, but we want to do a home inspection for informational purposes. Okay. And then they call me like, hey, Mike, we want to go do home inspection for informational purposes. Nope, not going to let you. You waived your right to negotiate.
Right.
Yeah, but we're just going to do it for information. Yeah, you can do it after you close, the day of. You're not doing it before. I'm protecting the seller.
Yeah.
And what they do is they get in after they're under contract and go, yeah, we don't like this house. Now they get out for the or they'll use the HOA docs.
Right.
We want to send the HOA docs in is right away. So I try to get the docs from you prior to us going under contract. So as soon as I'm under contract, the next thing I want to send you is the HOA docs, because in Virginia you got 3 days to look at those. After that, you lose your right to back out for HOA docs. But I've stopped somebody from going in. They're like, oh, we want to go in and just do informational purposes. No. And I learned this from a real estate attorney. He said, that's the dumbest thing us agents can do, because they get in there and they look at it and they're like, yeah, you know what? We don't like this. Let's get out. So that's a good way to protect the sellers. A lot of people were bringing home inspectors with them. They were doing a consultation. So they would walk through the house and the home inspector would come in and look at things real quick and give them a consultation and say yes or no. That's what they were doing during COVID.
Interesting.
So I love home inspections. I really, really do. But when you have 8 offers and all of them waived home inspection, how is your contract going to stand out?
Right.
And unfortunately, you might have to waive your home inspection. And some agents are getting sued later because of that. I'm like, well, it's not my decision. I'm just informing you there's 8 contracts and all of them are waived home inspection. What are you going to do to make your contract stand out?
Right.
So
yeah, you didn't tell them what to do. You just said, hey, this is.
I advised you. Yeah. It's your decision. I didn't tell you to put an offer in the house.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you how much to put an offer in the house over. I just gave you, because I would usually call and say, hey, our guys like your house. Have you had any offers? Oh yeah, I got 5.
Right.
You're not supposed to give me a price, but let's say it's 400. How much over? Well, I can't tell you how much over. And I'd be like, so if I wrote an offer for 415, does that make my offer really competitive? Oh, absolutely. Or no, you're not even close. And I heard that a lot in the last 2 years. Oh, you're not even close. What? What about 430? Nope. Still keep going. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
It's crazy.
So I would try to ask those questions. You can't tell me legally how much over, because then if that contract falls through, now I know I can go back. But I would try to protect the seller and depending on who I'm working with, I try to protect both. But I'm glad you're doing a home inspection or letting them do a home inspection. And and sometimes they want to get in, and after they look at the home inspection, they're like, yeah, we're out, even though nothing's wrong with your house.
Right.
It's a way for them to back out of the contract. It's unfortunate, but it's still a way to protect the buyer.
The way I look at it, we made it through one home inspection with only like 3 things they asked me to fix. So I'm not worried about the second one.
And those 3 things could be so small, like
there's
a leak in the kitchen. There's a leak underneath the kitchen sink, right? Okay, I'll get the plumber guy to come out and fix the pipe.
One of the things that I had to laugh at, it was the cap on the faucet handle for the sink. The cap was missing.
Yep. So now the knob can come off. The knob can come off and the thing get stuck.
Yeah, if you unscrew it, it can.
If you unscrew it. How about this? Hot and cold water were reversed from the builder.
Oh wow.
And only one sink in the whole entire house. So in the thing they fixed it. Now I ask, hey, can you guys fix this? They can be like, no, we're not fixing that. You can fix that. That's just as simple as unhooking the water, but they did it anyways. That's an easy fix, but still it's really, and most of it's a negotiation. Like, hey, they want these 3 things fixed. Obviously the cap on there is very simple. Maybe the other thing is a kitchen sink leak. Oh, that's easy, but maybe one's a little bit more difficult. And you're like, I don't want to deal with it. You can offer them some monetary compensation, or just say, I'm not fixing it. I mean, that's your choice. And then they have to go back to the buyer and say, they're not budging. They're not going to put that little plastic cap on top of that knob. So you either go get it yourself or,
Mhm.
walk away. And if
Yeah.
you're going to walk away from buying a house because of a
For a
plastic,
$12 part.
right? Is that ever going to the structure of the house? No, it's not going to change the value of the house.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're letting them do a home inspection. It's great. It just shows you're willing to sell your house too.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if it's, it's
I've
kind of one
even
of those things.
educated some sellers on offering a home warranty for
Mhm.
like a year. So a home warranty is $500, and you can put in the contract like the seller's going to give you a home warranty for a year because we know our house is good. We're not trying to hide anything, but we want to give you a peace of mind that you're buying our house. Here's a home warranty for a year.
Mhm.
Home warranty doesn't fix everything, but it gives you a peace of mind that if some stuff breaks, there's some compensation on the other side to help you get fixed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate your time, sir. I really enjoyed this conversation. Enjoy your time up in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we connected on Facebook as well. So, if you need any help with your PCS, like upcoming, I know you have a good agent, but if you think of some questions, don't be afraid to message me or call me.
Right on, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, enjoy your day. Hope the inspection goes well.
I'm sure it will, but I appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Later, Mike.
All right, bye.